Led Zeppelin, an English rock band formed in London in 1968 until 1980. Robert Plant vocals. Robert Anthony Plant, born 20th of August 1948, now aged 66 years at West Bromwich, Staffordshire, England. Genres: rock, hard rock, blues rock, folk rock, country rock. Occupations: musician and singer. Instruments: vocals, tambourine, harmonica. Years active as a performer/artist, 1965 to present. His labels are Atlantic, Swan Song, Esperanza, Sanctuary, Mercury, Universal Rounder, and Non-Such Records. Plant planned to become an accountant, but after 2 weeks left and went back to school. He then went on and became part of the English Midlands blues scene, developing his strong passion for blues through his inspiration from people like Willie Dixon and Robert Johnson. While developing his music career, Plant had various jobs, laying tarmac on roads and working at Woolworths. He sang with a variety of bands, including the Crawling King Snakes, where he met with drummer of Led Zeppelin, John Bonham, and the New Yardbirds, where he met Jimmy Page. Plant possessed a powerful and wide vocal range, particularly using his trademark high-pitched vocals. He started writing lyrics after encouragement from the band, and his first pieces were written in hotels while on tour after the first album, Whole Lot of Love and Heartbreaker. Plant's lyrics with Led Zeppelin were often mystical, philosophical, and spiritual, and influenced by J.R. Tolkien and Norse and Welsh mythology. Plant grew up to the Welsh border and would often take summer trips back for inspiration and writing lyrics. The Battle of Evermore and Over the Hills and Far Away. He married in 1968, had 3 children, and divorced in 1983. In 1977, his 5-year-old son, Karak, died of a stomach infection. Plant was on tour in the USA, and it was a devastating loss for the family. He returned home, and the death inspired him to write 2 songs, All My Love and In Through the Outdoor. In 1991, he fathered a child to his sister-in-law. Once the band had disbanded, he had a successful solo career covering over 40 years and still resides in England. Jimmy Page, electric guitar. James Patrick Page, born 9th of January 1944, now aged 71 years, at Heston, Middlesex, England. Genres are hard rock, heavy metal, blues rock, folk rock, skiffle, and blues. Occupations: musician, songwriter, multi-instrumentalist, recorder, and producer. Instruments Jimmy plays: a guitar. Years active as a performer or artist, 1957 to present. His labels are Swan Song, Atlantic, Geffen, Fontana, and Mercury. Page found a guitar left in a home the family had moved into in Epsom. With a little help from another pupil at school, at age 12, he learnt chords and taught himself from listening to records. He had a few lessons but continued his own development. At the age of 13. He appeared on Hugh Weldon's All Your Own Talent Quest program in a skiffle quartet with one performance which aired on BBC One in 1957. He informed Weldon he wanted to do biological research and find a cure for cancer. Page's early influences were rockabilly guitarists who played on recordings made by Elvis Presley, and his Baby Let's Play House gave Page his guitar inspirations. Skiffle, a Southern American style using washboards or self-made instruments, folk and blues, and used these styles to busk. He found it difficult to get enough people interested in putting a band together and often performed as backing to a poet. Page joined with the Crusaders at age 15 and toured for 2 years, having the single The Road to Love. Page became ill with glandular fever and put playing in a band on hold for 2 years while he attended art school. His guitar was still frequently in use, and he eventually became a sought-after session guitarist filling in for bands like The Who and The Kinks. He then went on to be an artistic developer of recording artists and songwriters where he learnt many skills. He became a member of Yardbirds from 1966 to 1968. In the late 1968, he founded Led Zeppelin, recruiting all other 3 players. He wanted this group to be a mix of blues, hard rock, and acoustic music with heavy choruses. John Bonham, the drummer, died at Page's home, and Page refused to touch his guitar in grief as the band broke up. He wrote many songs but was considered by some a better musician than a songwriter and producer. Stairway to Heaven would be the most well-known, and others he co-wrote with the band members, Kashmir and Baby Come Home, and he also collaborated with the bands to write The Kinks, The Who. Since 1980, Page has worked in short-term collaborations with the bands Infirm, The Honey Drippers, and in reunion with previous bands, also some film soundtrack, and is an active philanthropist. His work has influenced many musicians. In particular, much credit has been awarded for his solo in Stairway to Heaven. Most of his artistry was developed through his time as session guitarist, where he experimented with mics and amps and other technical issues. Page had a 13-year partnership with a French model, and they have a daughter. He then married another model in 1986, and they have a son, and then divorced in 1995. He again married to a Brazilian, adopting her child and then having 2 children before divorcing in 2008. Page admits to heavy drug taking in the 70s and to having a heroin addiction when he was able to overcome by the 80s, and comments that he does not remember much of some of the earlier times. He has been inducted into Rock and Roll Hall of Fame twice, once for a member of the Yardbirds in 1992 and once as a member of Led Zeppelin in 1995. Page still resides in Outer London and would love to have another reunion with the band, but Robert Plant appears unwilling, to which Page said he will play again. John Paul Jones, keys/bass, born John Baldwin, 3rd of January 1946, currently aged 69, Sidcup, Kent, England. Genres are rock. Occupations: musician, songwriter, arranger, film composer, producer, and actor. Instruments: bass guitar and keyboard. Years active: 1960 to present, and his labels are Discipline Global Mobile, Atlantic, and Swan Song. Starting piano at age 6, John was part of a musical family and was taught by his father, who was a pianist and arranger for big bands in the 40s and 50s. Because of his parents' touring, John attended boarding school, becoming a choral master and church organist. He brought a guitar and was inspired by the bass solo of Chicago musician Phil Upchurch on You Can't Sit Down. Jones joined his first band at 15, playing bass in a jazz rock London group, and then in 1962 was asked to join the Shadows. In 1964 he began studio sessions, arranging and undertaking general studio direction, and this led him to be in demand with many beginnings of famous groups like the Rolling Stones, Herman's Hermits, Rod Stewart, and many more. In 1964, he released a solo recording as John Paul Jones. This heavy workload took its toll, and by 1968 he considered himself burnt out. During the session times, Jones would often work with Jimmy Page and asked if a bass player was needed for the new Yardbirds. Due to Jones' proper music training and his ability to brilliantly arrange, he was accepted in the band. Jones was responsible for classic bass lines, example Ramble On and The Lemon Song, and for the power crunch and shifting time signatures Black Dog. Along with the drummer, they enjoyed funk and soul rhythmic grooves, which enhanced their musical style. Jones' keyboard was only part of his musicianship. He played 6 and 12-string guitars and a mandolin and even sang. Often he would be called to the studio to help with session work during his time with the band. After Led Zeppelin, he has worked with many artists including Peter Gabriel, Foo Fighters and Paul McCartney. He has been involved with soundtracks for film. Jones has his own recording studio, Sunday School, and helps establish his daughter's singing career, and he continues to produce, arrange, and even play for many bands. In 1995, he wrote 3 17th-century-style compositions developed with Baroque instruments, and in 1999 and 2001 released 2 solo albums and has toured with diverse combinations and the group The Foo Fighters. His bass, keyboards, and arranging have influenced many rockers. I think his formal music training, the influence of his musical parents, and his time learning in session had the greatest influences on his abilities to master his playing and arranging, whilst his more steady life gave the band foundation. John has been married since 1965 and has 3 daughters and is known as the quietest member of the group. John Bonham, drums. John Henry Bonham, born 31st of May 1948, died 25th of September 1980, aged 32. Redditch, Worcestershire, England, United Kingdom. Genres are hard rock, heavy metal, blues rock, folk rock. Occupations, musician and songwriter. Instruments, drums and percussion. His years active were 1962 to 1980, and his labels were Atlantic and Swan Song. He began drumming at age 5 by making a kit out of a container and coffee tins, imitating his idols like Max Roach and Buddy Rich, also famous drummers. As a 10-year-old, his mum brought his first snare drum and then received his first drum kit at 15 from his father. Bonham never had drum lessons, only receiving tips from other drummers. His headmaster wrote in his report that he will either end up with a dustman or a millionaire. After leaving school in 1964, he worked for his father as an apprentice carpenter when not drumming for the other bands. In 1964, Bonham joined his first band, Terry Webb and the Spiders, and drummed with other bands before joining blues groups, Crawling King Snakes, who had Robert Plant as lead singer. He returned to one of his original bands before starting with the New Yardbirds and then onto Led Zeppelin. He used Ludwig drums with the longest and heaviest sticks, allowing the hard hitting for which he is famous. Immigrant Song, Kashmir. He had a liking for funk and Latin influence drumming with strong dynamics, Royal Orleans. His drum solo, named Pat's Delight after his wife, could last 30 minutes, and he used bare hands for different sounds. I think Bonham had a love of antique cars and motorbikes kept at his farm, and he owned a hotel in the West Midlands. During his time with the band, he was able to drum with other groups. He was found dead due to alcohol consumption at Jimmy Page's home and left a widow and 2 children. Led Zeppelin ceased playing. Bonham has been rated as the #1 drummer and has influenced many, including Van Halen, Uriah Heep, and Red Hot Chili Peppers. In 1985, the surviving members of Led Zeppelin joined to play for the Live Aid concert with Tony Thompson, The Power Station, and Phil Collins, assisting with drums, and in 1988 they performed for Atlantic Records' 40th anniversary with Bonham's son as drummer. I think the band was successful as they were at the start of an era, breaking new ground, and they loved what they did. Having started from early ages and having the various backgrounds and the knowledge obtained from being session workers, and they were open to helping and working with others in the industry. Led Zeppelin Rock and Roll, released as the second track from Led Zeppelin's fourth album in 1971, which includes a guest appearance by the Rolling Stones pianist Ian Stewart. This album has no title but is referred to as Led Zeppelin's fifth or untitled or Zoso as a representation of the four symbols of the record label. It was released on the 21st of February 1972. The format is a 7-inch 45 RMP record, and it was recorded by Headley Grange, Headley, England, December 1970 to March 1971. The genre is hard rock and rock and roll. The length of rock and roll is 3 minutes 40, and the label is Atlantic. Composers of the song: John Bonham, John Paul Jones, Jimmy Page, and Robert Plant. Producer: Jimmy Page. Led Zeppelin chronology: Black Dog, Misty Mountain Hop, 1971. Rock and Roll, Four Sticks, 1972. Over the Hills and Far Away, Dancing Days, 1973. What's the song based on? This song is based on one of the most popular structures in rock and roll, the 12-bar blues progression. Rock and Roll is one of the best-known songs in the band's catalogue. This song is said by Jimmy Page, guitarist, to have come about as a spontaneous jam session whilst the band were trying to finish the track, Four Sticks. Page said drummer John Bonham played the introduction to Little Richard's Keep a Knockin', and Page added a guitar riff. The tapes were rolling, and 15 minutes later the basis of the song was down. It was said to be written to confirm to audiences they were a rock and roll band, as their previous albums was more acoustic blues, and by the 70s many more rock bands were performing, and Led Zeppelin wanted to keep their identity of being rock and being accepted. The 70s was a time of liberation, freedom of speech, removing barriers such as racism and gender roles, but there was also the times of openness of drugs, sexual freedom and non-conforming, and the problems associated. Rock and Roll is one of the few Led Zeppelin songs where all four members share the composer credit. The lyrics singer, Robert Plant, references 1950s and 1960s early rock hits, including The Stroll, a song and slow dance of the 50s, The Book of Love, a song of the 50s, and Walking in the Moonlight. There is a romance to the song, also looking back to A Long Time Since I Rock and Rolled, could refer to the attempt to pull their music back to rock, or could be interpreted as a thought back in time, a long, lonely time. Making vows that just can't work right, again could relate to making promises to your audience for rock and roll when the songs of the night might not fit, or it could be that they can't keep promises to a relationship, but open your arms, let me be accepted for what it is or I am. To receive a unique sound for the guitar, Jimmy Page plugged his guitar straight into the mixing console, which meant the traditional amplifier and microphone setup were no longer needed in this situation. Rock and roll was a key component of the band's setlist at Led Zeppelin's concerts from 1971 onwards. Initially, Robert Plant referred to it as "On Stage, It's Been a Long Time," which is the first line of the song. In 1972, Rock and Roll was elevated to the opening number of all concert performances and retained the status until 1975, when for the band's 1977 tour it became part of a melody encore with Whole Lotta Love, and during 1979 and 1980 it became an encore in its own right. While performing the song live, singer Robert Plant normally switched the second verse with the third, and from the late 1972, Plant altered the vocal melody to a lower overall pitch to suit his changing vocal range. In 2001, Rock and Roll became the first Led Zeppelin song to be licensed for a television series, which was The Sopranos, Season 3 episode, Fortunate Son. In 2002, it became one of the most famous classic rock songs to be licensed for use in a series of television ads by General Motors for the Cadillac line of automobiles. The song was later used as an opening theme of the Suburban 2011 documentary series, Rakovnik.
I think this is a song of hope. There's a lady who's sure all that glitters is gold, and she's buying staring to heaven. And when she gets there, she knows if the stores are all closed, with a word she can get what she came for. She's buying the stairway to heaven. There's a sign on the wall, but she wants to be sure, 'cause you know sometimes words have two meanings. In a tree by the brook, there's a songbird who sings,